Hey girl, welcome to my channel. So happy to have you. Give me 5 minutes and I promise you that by the end of this video, you would have agreed with me that it's way smarter to start having your kids in your 20s as opposed to like 30s or something. Now, right off the bat though, let me get something really clear. First and foremost, this video is not for people who have decided that they don't want to have kids. This video is also not for people who are not like married and so on, because I'm a strong advocate for having kids after marriage, or at the absolute very least make sure that your boyfriend or whatever fiance is on board with having kids before you get pregnant, right? Because I've heard of lots of women being in relationships, getting pregnant, and they're going to like their boyfriend and be like, hey, I'm pregnant. And then he's like, huh? Because, you know, men are weird like that. So that's why we gotta like, keep our brain on. That's my son. He's playing. But yeah, so first reason why you should like start having your kids in your 20s. Biology. It's something that is there. It's like this simple fact of reality that I feel like a lot of people try to downplay, or they try to pretend that it doesn't happen, it doesn't exist. But the reality is that from the time a woman starts like say puberty at 12, 13 years old, she starts the beginning of the end of her fertile window. Eggs are gradually decreasing over the years. So the older we get, the less eggs we have, and the quality of our eggs also decrease. For example, when I got pregnant with my son, who's behind me, I was 33 years old, and the doctors were already screening me for trisomy 21. Because why? I was 33, and statistics show that the quality of my eggs would have normally already started declining. Doctors would not do this if this was not an issue. So it always baffles me when I meet women that are in like their 30s and they're saying, oh, I'm not ready to have kids yet. I'm working on my career. And I oftentimes think that this is a weird woman who is strange. She doesn't have a proper grasp on reality. That's what I often think. But I don't always say it, of course. That wouldn't be nice. But that's reason number one. Reason number two is that aside from us having a finite supply of eggs, which is in stark contrast to men, because I've heard of men that are like 60, 70 years old still making kids. Despite that, also, we want to have it all as women, you know? We want to have the career, we want to have the family, we want to have the kids and everything else. And a lot of women think that by putting the career first, so doing the career in their 20s and putting the kids off for like their 30s or 40s, they think somehow they're going to have it all. I don't know who told us this lie, but it's like this far-fetched lie that's widely and readily available to everybody. But the reality is that if we focus on our career like in her 20s, and then we started to think of making kids in our 30s, chances are we can get there and then here we cannot make kids. And this is a fact that I think has been becoming more and more prevalent. So what I've seen a lot of women trying to do is that they start trying to say, let me try to freeze my eggs, etc., etc. So when the time comes, I can have kids and stuff like that. I think this might more so apply to the wealthier women, but for the average folk, it's not an option that a lot of average folks can afford, I'm sure. But that aside, that is like going against the tide. You know what I mean? Going against the tide in anything is like a surefire way to make anything harder than it needs to be. It's simple. If you start having your kids when you are at your most fertile, then it's easier to have them. Now, let's just like flip the script a bit and just kind of turn everything on its head. I'm playing devil's advocate now. Let's just say that you decide, you know what? She's talking nonsense. I'm just going to focus on my career in my 20s. And then a later point, I'm going to try to have my kids at a later time. Then you get to your 30s and then you hear you cannot have kids, but you have your career. Where does that leave you? You don't have it all. You just have a part of it, but you don't have the entire thing. And on the other hand, if you have your kids, like you take about 10 years and you have your kids and then you get back to working, say in your 30s, approaching 40s, etc., then you would have had it all by the time you get to 50 because your kids are older now and your career is established. But wait a second. A lot of people would say, wait. Put your career on hold. You look after your kids. And then when you go back to work, employers will be like, what were you doing for the past 10 years? You ain't got no experience. We can't hire you. That is true. But there's a workaround for this because all you need to do is stay updated on whatever is happening in your field. So take courses, study, that kind of stuff. So by the time you go back to work and your employer says, what were you doing in the last 10 years? You'll be like, oh yeah, I got this certificate, I got that certificate, I did this degree, I did that, whatever. Then you'll be like, wait, but I don't have time to do this because I'm looking after kids. There are tons of online universities now, like it's just all over the place. It's like the easiest thing. So not having the time to do it is like strange, weird excuse. And outside of that, this is 2025. I know of tons of women starting businesses from their home. That is to say, you don't necessarily need to go back to work for somebody. As a matter of fact, it might actually be smarter to start your business than to go back to work because you can scale your earnings so much more faster and so much more higher if you were to do your own business. You can start your service-based business and whatever your field is, you can take your skill or your hobby and turn it into a business. I know women selling all kinds of little knickknacks on Etsy, etc. So we have a lot of options available to us to the point that at this point, we can have both. We can have our family and we can have our kids. And we can live more of a fulfilling life. Like we don't have to say, let's run for the career first and leave the kids after. But wait for a second. I also heard lots of other objections. Like one of the objections I heard is that if you start to make your kids in your 20s, it may be too much of a early point in life to start sacrificing. Well, for starters, while having kids is a sacrifice, I think the idea is how people view sacrifices. I view sacrifice, and I think this is the way sacrifice should be viewed. I view sacrifice as a necessary thing to experience what we call love. So I feel like love cannot exist without sacrifice. And some people may be like, what are you talking about? But think about it. When you're in like a marriage, for example, if you're not willing to give up something for the good of your husband or your wife, then chances of your marriage working is like close to nil, right? Because you have to be able to give up a part of yourself for the good of the other person. That's how love works. That happens when you have kids, that happens when you're married, that happens with your parents. It's just like an inevitable part of life if you want to experience love. So to be scared of sacrifice is childish. It doesn't make any sense. So that's one objection that I'm like, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. The other objection I hear is that, but maybe in your 20s you're not like smart enough and you don't have enough knowledge to pass on to kids. You probably haven't gained control of your past demons, so it's probably not a good time to have kids. The reality is, look, we live in a world where bad things inevitably happen. It's just a part of life. It's just the state of the world that we live in. So everyone is going to have their little demons in the closet. Me, myself, everybody else. It's just a fact of life. And I feel like we cannot let that detour us from important things like having kids, right? And outside of that too as well, when it comes to like having knowledge to share to your kids and stuff like that, like at what point, and I made this response to somebody in my short that I made on YouTube, at what point will you be deemed smart enough to have kids? At what point does someone have enough knowledge to give to their kids? Like, does this point vary from person to person? Because the reality is that we are constantly learning. We never stop learning until the day we die. So to use a scale that's ever moving to gauge your smartness level to see how much you can give to a child is kind of silly because the scale is always moving. So it's hard to stick a pin if it's not constant, if you get what I'm saying. So there was that, and I heard this argument before where people say, oh, somebody's like really silly or really dumb and they got kids, like why are they having kids, etc. I've also heard the flip side that the matter is not where you come from, but where you're going. So not because somebody isn't really bright and then they have kids, and bright by whose ever standards, and they have kids, it means that those kids are doomed. Right? Those kids still have the ability to craft their own futures, because who we become is not only determined by the kind of parents that we have and how we were brought up, but also by society and our own intellect as well. So it's not just a one-fold kind of thing. That's the other option, right? So, and then I've heard people say, oh, to each his own, and so on and so forth. And that I would agree with as well. Like I said at the start of this video is not for people who have decided they don't want kids, and it's also not for people who are not married, because I wouldn't advocate people to have kids if they're not married. That's just me, right? And yeah. Okay, so that's like all of the arguments that I can think of for the moment as it relates to why you should have your kids in your 20s. The gist of it being that in the end you would have had the best of both worlds. But outside of that, it was nice having you. It was lovely that you sat down and you looked at me. If you like my content and if you're interested in more, definitely subscribe. Ta-ta.